drawing we're going to look at now is the window sill or the window detail in a passive concrete cavity wall. Okay, so made with an inner leaf and outer leaf of concrete blocks. Okay, so now all I'm literally using for this, ruler and a pencil. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to start off with is just one vertical line here. I'm on an A3 page, but you could do this on an A4. If you're doing it on an A4, turn the page up portrait if you have it. Okay, so I'm just going to put in that line there first. Okay, so nice and light to start. So we're only going to do a certain part of this now in part 1, and in part 2 we'll look at a little bit more detail on it. Okay, so we're going to try and get the window sill in, and we're going to try and get our lintels put in at the top as well. Alright, so that first line that I've put in there, right, again, just put it in with the ruler. I'm going to look at now adding in, I'm starting on the left hand side of my detail, right. It'll make a bit more sense as when we just get started at it. Okay, so I'm going to put in where my external render is, then I'm going to put in the external leaf of blocks, then I'm going to put in where the insulation is, the inner leaf of blocks, and then the internal plaster. Okay, so try and think back to the previous drawings that you've done, how thick the plaster was. Okay, so external plaster should be around 18mm. Alright, so depending on the person doing it. Alright, I'm just leaving it as a 2mm gap. Alright, I marked it out twice there just to make sure my lines are going parallel. Last thing I want is them to be joining at the top. Okay, so that's where the external render is. Then I'm going to come in 10mm, so for the width of the block. I'm going to do the same up here again, just to try and keep me drawn straight. Okay, so now I have external render, row of blocks. Then I'm going to look at putting in my insulation. Alright, so it's a passive house, so there's 250mm of insulation between the inner leaf and the outer leaf. So again, measuring twice. Okay, so insulation's going there. Then I want my inner leaf, so the internal row blocks. And then my internal plaster would be around 12 to 15mm. Again, I'm just going to mark it off as 2 on this, because we're doing drawing scale 1:10. Okay, so now this might look a little bit more easier to follow, right? So render, blocks, insulation, blocks, internal plaster. Okay, so now we just want to put our finishing point here at the bottom. Alright, so nothing goes below that line. Okay, it just signifies that the drawing actually continues on, even though we're not going to continue on. Right, so there would have to be the foundation underneath that, or coming down to the floor. Okay, so now we're going to mark in a couple of blocks. Alright, so we're going to start off by marking out 22mm there. I'm going to put 2mm of cement between them, and then another 22mm. Alright, and I'm just going to bring these lines across to the inner leaf as well. Alright, so bring those across, again just using the ruler. And there we have two of our blocks put in. Okay, so now when it comes to putting on the windowsill itself, okay, so the windowsill is what the window actually sits onto, right? It's designed in a certain way that allows water to run off it. It's reinforced with steel as well to prevent it from cracking or from breaking. Alright, they vary in size depending on where you get it. Okay, so this one we're going to say is 30 millimeters in length across the bottom. Alright, so just follow with me for now, and it'll make a little bit more sense then in a couple of minutes. Alright, so 30mm from there. go through, sitting on top of the blocks, has to be supported, and out that side. Okay, so this is going to be the bottom of it. Next thing I'm going to do is the vertical height of it. Vertical height of it's usually around 100 millimeters, so we're going to measure up 10. Okay, and then we have to draw in the rest of our profile. So I'm coming across here, I'm coming across 6 millimeters. This is where our window frame actually sits onto it. Right, so your window frame sits down onto the windowsill, and come down here a small bit. At the front then we rise up 5 mil, and then you don't have to be overly sticky on measurements there once you get the profile, something like that. The important points to note with the likes of that is that has to be sloped down, right? So the rain, you'll see when we finish the drawing, but the rain hits the window, comes down, and it has to flow away. Alright, then another design will be here at the front. Okay, so here at the front you would have what's called a drip. Okay, so it's a small indentation that's put into the windowsill, that as the rain comes down, flows around, comes into the drip, and the drip is there to design to actually make it fall down. Alright, so to make it disappear, or to go down the outside of the wall. So then we want to carry on then with the likes of this. So the top of that windowsill comes right the way into here. Right, so comes right the way across. So then you have one more small little block, right? Wouldn't be a full block put in there, but just to bring it up to the correct height. Alright, so you'd have two, to say here, 2 full blocks there, then you have 2 full, and then a half one. Alright, so then, alright, a couple of important bits of detail now. Alright, so if all the rain is coming down here, hitting off the windowsill, the last thing you want is it to actually penetrate through that, and then it might actually get into your internal structure. Alright, so we were talked about it when we were doing the foundation drawings about DPC, so the damp proof course. Right, so the damp proof course is to be wrapped around the windowsill. Right, so it would actually be wrapped around here, down the back of it, come along underneath, and it comes out just outside of that, and it just strips down. Okay, so it just hangs down ever so slightly. Right, so that's your DPC in this. You would also have, just say for example, you could have a couple of reinforcement bars going through that windowsill as well. Okay, so that's one thing that's very important there. Okay, so you have your DPC wrapped around the windowsill because the window frame is going to be here when we get onto that part, and then the rain comes down. You don't want it coming through that and into the insulation. Alright, so then another important thing is, how do you close off this cavity? Alright, so you would have insulation put in here, but there's what's called cavity closing insulation. Alright, so you'd put in a bit of rigid insulation. Its measurements would be 50 millimeters, so 5 mil. And you would put that guy in. Alright, so I'm going freehand at this. Alright, remember this symbol for rigid insulation. You should anyway. Okay, so then that would be how you would close off that cavity, and then you would have your insulation right the way up. Alright, so right the way up until you get up underneath the windowsill. So that'd be your first thing. Alright, that's where I would start off with on this drawing. Alright, so important points just in that section alone. That DPC is wrapped around the windowsill. That's cavity closing insulation, and this is also insulation here. That's rigid, that's quilted, right, or beads in some cases. Alright, then you have your external render, internal plaster. Okay, so that's how I would start the drawing, I would start off by producing that first, right, before I start worrying about doing any window details. Okay, so now we will have to draw on more window details at some point. Okay, so the drawing will have to come up to there, and the next thing we're going to look at, just when we're working on it here, is going to be the top part of this. Alright, so we've talked about in the walls chapter how openings are supported, right? So openings are supported on the inner leaf and the outer leaf, right? So whether it's a steel support or concrete support, alright? So I'm just going to go up here roughly, I don't know, so say from the top of the windowsill, just go up 120, just if you're trying to suss it out, not that fussed on that either. Okay, so I'm just going to bring a line right the way across there, and now I'm going to start building up. I'm going to start building up on top of that line. Alright, for one block. Alright, so the first thing that has to go in, you have to put in your concrete lintel. Alright, so concrete lintel usually measures 100 by 75. Alright, so if that's 100 wide, alright, so 10 mil, 75, so 7.5 millimeters high. That'll be there. So again, this will be reinforced, so you would have steel going through it, and then we have our blocks on top of that. Alright, so you'd put in a small bit of cement on top of this to let the blocks bond onto it. Okay, so we'll bring those across. And then we'll put on our symbol here that the drawing continues on. So it'll continue on up onto what's called the eaves detail, which is where your walls join the roof structure. Okay, so same again, I'm just going to show the little bit of cement that's put between the next couple of blocks as well. Alright, so that's where I'd start up here. So that's a lintel, right? So when we were working down here, we had a cavity closing insulation, so we're going to have something similar up here, right? Except it's just going to be a lot wider, because here we had the windowsill helping close the gap. Up here it's completely wide open. Alright, so same size, it's going to be 50 mil. And then you would have your quilted insulation and or the beads on top carrying through. Something like that. Alright, so that would be the first part here. Then just when we're at it, we have our DPC again. Right, so the DPC is such a vital bit of plastic that's put in, and it's put in numerous places. So the DPC in this case would have to go along here and down, and then depending on where the window frame finishes off, it should just stick out just at the window frame, and then it'll be plastered over. Alright, so it'll be hidden from there. So that would be the first part of this drawing. Right, so if you could get to there, don't be overly complicating measurements on the windowsill. Right, try and follow what I was saying. The areas or the measurements that are crucial is that's 2 mil there, because 18 mil normally. That's 10 millimeters, that's 25 millimeters, that's 10 again, and then that's 2. Right, so once you've got those lines going up the page, you're fairly well set up. to get going.